A high school senior from Alabama is missing today.
Now police there are treating the case as a criminal investigation.
Looking for Natalee Holloway here in Aruba has become almost a national obsession.
We will do whatever it takes. As I've said from the beginning, I'm not leaving Aruba without her.
For nearly 2 decades, Natalee Holloway's disappearance remained one of the most haunting unsolved cases in modern history. Now, the mystery has finally been solved, and the truth is far worse than anyone ever imagined. Investigators have uncovered a disturbing chain of events driven by obsession, deception, and unimaginable cruelty.
My worst nightmare is these individuals will walk, and we will still not have any answer.
What was once a heartbreaking mystery has become a chilling reality, forcing the world to confront the nightmare behind Natalee's disappearance. A dream trip turns into a nightmare. In May 2005, Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old honors student from Mountain Brook High School in Alabama, traveled to the Caribbean island of Aruba. She was part of a senior class trip, along with 124 of her classmates, to celebrate their graduation. The trip was meant to be a fun and carefree getaway, a final moment of freedom before they all returned home to start their futures. For Natalee, that future was filled with promise. She had earned a full scholarship to the University of Alabama and was planning to major in pre-med. Her ultimate goal was to become a doctor. Natalee was known for being bright, hardworking, and full of life. Everyone who knew her described her as kind, responsible, and highly motivated. But what was supposed to be a joyful and unforgettable trip quickly turned into a nightmare. On the night of May 30, 2005, just hours before the group was scheduled to fly back to the United States, Natalee disappeared without a trace. That evening, she had gone out with friends to Carlos and Charlie's, a popular nightclub in the capital city of Oranjestad. It was the final night of the trip, and spirits were high. Sometime during the night, Natalee was seen leaving the club with 3 young men: Joran van der Sloot, a 17-year-old Dutch honors student who lived on the island, and 2 brothers, Deepak and Satish Kalpo.
Articles about this man.
He's the Playboy suspect.
17-year-old Joran van der Sloot.
Implicated in the disappearance of an American woman from the island of Aruba exactly 5 years earlier.
According to the story they first told police, the 3 claimed they had dropped Natalee off safely at her hotel, but Natalee never returned to her room. No one ever saw her alive again. The next morning, panic began to spread among her classmates and trip organizers when Natalee failed to show up for the airport departure. Her luggage was still packed in her room, untouched. Her passport was found inside. It was immediately clear that she had not planned to leave on her own. Something had gone terribly wrong. Natalee's disappearance quickly became one of the most haunting and heartbreaking mysteries in recent memory, and when the truth about what had really happened to Natalee finally surfaced, it would prove to be even more horrifying than anyone had imagined. But first, the world witnessed one of the largest search efforts in Aruba's history. A global search and a web of misdirection. Local police, volunteers, residents, and even members of the FBI quickly commenced a search for Natalee after her friends reported her missing. Teams covered beaches, checked diving sites, combed through forests, and drove along remote roads. Planes flew over the island, searching from the air. Boats scanned the waters around Aruba. Tracking dogs were brought in to follow any possible trail. But despite the scale of the search and the number of people involved, no trace of Natalee was found. Not a single item she had with her was recovered. Her phone, her purse, even her shoes were gone. There were no signs of a struggle. No witness came forward with solid information. No surveillance footage revealed anything useful. The only clue was the 3 people Natalee was last seen with: Joran van der Sloot and brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpo. All 3 were quickly identified and brought in for questioning. They initially claimed they had dropped Natalee off safely at her hotel, but when police pressed them, their stories began to change. One said they had taken her to the beach. Another suggested they left her in the car. Their timelines were inconsistent. Their answers didn't match. Investigators became increasingly suspicious. Just days later, all 3 were arrested. But with no physical evidence and no eyewitnesses to confirm any version of events, authorities were forced to let them go. Over the next 2 years, they would be arrested and released again multiple times. Still, prosecutors never had enough solid proof to charge them. In 2007, a judge ruled that there was no evidence Natalee had died due to violence. Yet the suspicion never went away. Meanwhile, Joran's behavior became even more disturbing. He denied knowing what happened. Then in 2008, he told an undercover Dutch journalist that Natalee had died in his presence and that he had disposed of her body. It was a shocking claim. But soon after, he took it back, saying he had lied to impress the reporter. The confession was fake, he insisted. investigators were left with nothing they could rely on. Each new twist in the story only deepened the confusion and heartbreak. Every lie reopened the wounds for Natalee's family. Her parents were devastated. Her mother, Beth Holloway, became the public face of the search. She refused to give up. She traveled back and forth to Aruba, held press conferences, and spoke directly to the media. Her determination was unshakable. At one point, the family offered a $1 million reward for any credible information that would lead to Natalee's return. They hoped money would break someone's silence, but no new information came. As months turned into years, the investigation lost momentum. No remains were found. No forensic evidence pointed to a suspect. The case stalled completely. The authorities had nothing concrete, and the Holloway family had no closure. They were trapped in a cycle of grief and unanswered questions. The pain of not knowing became unbearable. They were left holding on to hope that never seemed to lead anywhere. But as the Holloways would one day come to learn, the truth behind what happened to Natalee was far more disturbing than anything they had imagined. As investigators struggled to uncover solid evidence, the void left behind was quickly filled by speculation, and they were relentless. Theories, suspicions, and a decade of doubt. Most people eventually began to believe that there was much more to the story than what had been shared with the public. What started as quiet whispers of a possible cover-up soon grew louder over time. Suspicion began to fall heavily on the Aruban authorities, especially Joran's father, who was serving as a judge on the island at that time. From the very beginning, several details did not make any sense. The Calpo brothers and Joran were arrested early in the investigation, but they were released surprisingly quickly. Their stories were inconsistent, and they changed with each telling. Despite these clear contradictions, the authorities never seemed to fully investigate the gaps in their statements. To many, it appeared as though someone in a position of power might have been protecting them or trying to quietly make the entire case disappear. As time went on and the investigation lost momentum, new and unsettling theories began to spread. Some people no longer believed Natalee had lost her life on the island. Instead, they feared she may have been abducted. There were disturbing rumors that Joran had ties to the illegal deeds. This led many to wonder if Natalee had been taken alive. Some believed she might still be out there somewhere, held against her will and unable to find a way back. Others feared she could be suffering from memory loss, no longer aware of who she was or what had happened to her. The possibility that Natalee might still be alive created a different kind of suffering for her family. Beth Holloway, in particular, refused to give up. She held on to hope year after year. She chased every lead, no matter how small or unlikely. She was determined to keep searching for her daughter, even when the world around her moved on. But in 2010, something happened that caused even more pain for Beth. Joran reached out to her directly. He told her that he knew where Natalee's body was. He claimed he would give her the location, but only if she paid him $250,000. What Betty did next is heart-wrenching. She did not hesitate. She believed that this might finally give her the answers she had waited so long to receive. She agreed to the payment and gave him the money. What Joran gave her in return was not the truth, but a cruel and deliberate lie. He told her that Natalee's remains were buried beneath the foundation of a building near the Aruba Racket Club. Quickly, investigators looked into his claim. They reviewed satellite images and construction records. They discovered that no building had ever existed on that site at the time Joran claimed. There was no foundation, no structure, and no sign of Natalee. The story was false from beginning to end. Joran had taken advantage of Beth's grief and desperation. He had lied for money, knowing exactly how badly she needed the truth. The emotional toll this betrayal took on Beth was devastating. She had already spent years living with uncertainty. She had followed every possible lead and continued to hope through every heartbreak. Now, the man she believed was responsible for her daughter's disappearance had taken her pain and used it to harm her again. He had given her hope, taken her money, and then crushed her all over again with a heartless lie. The betrayal was more than just cruel. It left Beth with even more sorrow and more unanswered questions. Her trust had been used against her in one of the most painful ways possible. For many years, the mystery continued to attract attention. The media, the public, and even private investigators searched for the missing pieces. Everyone had their own version of what they believed happened, but no one had the truth. The case remained one of the most talked about unsolved disappearances in the world. Still, no one could say for certain what had happened to Natalee. That changed nearly 20 years after she vanished. But when the truth finally came to light, it turned out to be more than just a sad story. It was something far more disturbing. That unsettling reality began to surface in 2012, when another young woman went through a horrifyingly similar experience. Declared dead, but still no justice. By 2012, 7 long and painful years had gone by since Natalee's disappearance. Her case had captured the world's attention. Many followed the case closely, clinging to the hope that answers would come. However, no matter how many searches were conducted or how many people were questioned, there was still no trace of Natalee. There were no confirmed sightings. No physical evidence had ever emerged to clearly show what had happened to her. The lack of information only deepened the pain for her family. As time passed, hope began to fade. Despite holding on to the belief that Natalee might still be found, her family eventually faced a painful legal decision. In 2012, a judge in Alabama declared Natalee Holloway legally deceased. This step was emotionally devastating. It was not a conclusion her loved ones wanted to reach, but it provided some form of recognition for the loss they had endured. The ruling did not bring answers. It only confirmed what her family had feared for years. For Beth Holloway, the decision to declare her daughter dead was like officially giving up on the hope that had sustained her for so long. Then something deeply disturbing happened. On May 30, 2010, exactly 5 years after Natalee went missing, a young woman named Stephanie Flores was found lifeless in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She was a 21-year-old college student who had her entire future ahead of her. Investigators quickly discovered that she had been with Joran van der Sloot, the same man who was the prime suspect in Natalee's case. Stephanie and Joran had met at a local casino and later went to his hotel room. It was later revealed that Stephanie had reportedly come across files on Joran's laptop related to Natalee's disappearance. That discovery may have triggered a violent reaction. Stephanie suffered fatal injuries in that hotel room. After the attack, Joran fled Peru. He attempted to escape into Chile, but was quickly caught and taken into custody. This time, there was no uncertainty. The evidence clearly pointed to him. Unlike in Natalee's case, this time there was proof, and it could not be denied. In 2012, Joran was sentenced to 28 years in a Peruvian prison for his involvement in Stephanie's death. The sentence marked a moment of justice, but it did not erase the heartbreak. Then, in 2021, he was given an additional 18-year sentence for smuggling cocaine into the prison where he was serving time. Despite the additional conviction, Peruvian law limits the total prison sentence to a maximum of 35 years unless the crime results in life imprisonment. Based on the current legal outcome, Joran is scheduled to be released on or around June 10, 2045, unless further legal steps are taken to extend or change his sentence. Joran's conviction for Stephanie's death brought renewed focus to Natalee's case. For Natalee's family, it confirmed the fears they had carried for years. Many believed that Joran's actions in Peru reflected what might have happened to Natalee. Her family saw in Stephanie's tragedy the terrible possibility of their own. The disturbing similarities were too strong to ignore. Beth Holloway and her supporters felt more certain than ever that Natalee's disappearance had not been an accident, but the result of someone dangerous. Joran's conviction also reinforced their belief that Stephanie's case could finally lead to answers about Natalee's disappearance. Eventually, it did, though not through a murder charge, but when Joran was extradited to the US for committing fraud against Natalee's grieving mother. A killer's confession and a chilling truth. In June 2023, Joran was temporarily extradited to Alabama to face federal charges of wire fraud and extortion related to his scam against Beth Holloway in 2010. It was during this case that everything changed. As part of a plea deal, Joran agreed to give a full and honest confession in what is legally called a proffer. This was his opportunity to tell the truth in exchange for a lighter sentence. What he revealed during that confession was deeply disturbing and devastating. According to his own words, Natalee rejected him when he tried to make advances at her on the beach. She responded by defending herself and kneeing him in the crotch. In retaliation, he admitted that he kicked her in the face with full force, causing her to lose consciousness. Then, in a moment of horrifying cruelty, he found a cinder block nearby and used it to hit her in the head until she stopped moving. After that, he pushed her body into the ocean. Joran told prosecutors that when it was over, he simply walked home. In his own words, "After that, I get out. I walk home." His words were delivered with shocking calmness, revealing no emotion or remorse for what he had done. What followed was almost impossible to comprehend. He described returning to his daily life as if nothing had happened. That same day, he checked soccer scores, took a shower, and went to school. The complete lack of guilt or reflection was chilling to those who heard the details. In his statement, Joran also made it clear that the Calpo brothers, who had long been suspected of involvement, had nothing to do with the incident. He said he acted entirely on his own. This part of his confession lifted the cloud of suspicion that had hung over the Calpos for years, finally giving some clarity to that part of the story. Beth Holloway later confirmed that Duran's confession had been backed by a polygraph test, which added credibility to his account. The court accepted his plea agreement. For his crimes of extortion and wire fraud, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. This sentence will run at the same time as the one he is already serving in Peru for a separate crime. However, the terms of the deal state that if he is ever released from prison in Peru, he will be brought back to the United States to serve the rest of his time. After nearly 2 decades of rumors, theories, and heartbreaking questions, the truth about what happened to Natalee Holloway was finally revealed. But the reality turned out to be far more painful than anyone had imagined. The brutality of the act, combined with the cold and emotionless way Duran spoke about it, left the courtroom stunned. It was not just the crime itself that shocked people. It was the lack of humanity in Duran's behavior. The way he described the moment so casually, without any sense of guilt, sorrow, or empathy. The courtroom response would reflect the full emotional weight of that moment. The verdict, heard around the world. Outside the federal courthouse, Beth Holloway finally stood with the truth she had been chasing for nearly 2 decades. The person who had once been just a suspect in her daughter's disappearance was no longer a question mark. He had finally admitted what he had done. "It's over," Beth said, her voice calm but trembling with emotion. Her eyes were full of tears, though she tried her hardest not to let them fall. She took a deep breath and continued. "Duran van der Sloot is no longer the suspect in my daughter's case. He is the one responsible."
Duran van der Sloot is no longer the suspect in my daughter's murder. He is the killer.
Those words held the weight of nearly 2 decades of suffering. They were the words of a mother who had never stopped fighting for her child. She had lived with heartbreak every day since Natalee's disappearance. Inside the courtroom, she had faced the man who had stolen her daughter's future. She stood strong, but her sorrow was clear to everyone who watched her speak. She had looked directly at Duran and spoken with a voice that was steady and sharp. "You are responsible," she said, speaking from the courtroom lectern, "and I want you to remember that every time that jail cell door slams shut." Beth had listened as the horrifying details were read aloud. The man who took her daughter's life had returned home afterward, as if nothing had happened. He had gone on with his day without regret, without care, and without conscience. Beth looked straight at him one more time. Her words were blunt and honest. She did not sugarcoat the truth. "You look like hell, Duran. I don't see how you're going to make it." Judge Anna Manasco also addressed the court with seriousness and clarity. She made sure everyone understood the gravity of what had happened. She had read the confession. She had heard the pain in Beth's voice. She responded with strength and precision. "I have considered your confession to be a brutal act against Natalee Holloway," Judge Manasco said. "You have taken the lives of 2 beautiful young women who simply refused your unwanted advances, and you did this in separate incidents years apart." U.S. Attorney Prim Escalona also spoke during the proceedings. She acknowledged the unimaginable pain that Beth and her family had carried for so long. She gave voice to what many had been thinking. "I cannot imagine the heartache, the sleepless nights, and the countless tears Beth and her family must have shed," she said. Despite their sorrow, the Holloway family never gave up. Their love for Natalee is what brought us here today. Beth's strength has become the voice of every grieving mother who has ever searched for justice, and her daughter's story, marked by tragedy and resilience, would never be forgotten. Why this case will never be forgotten. The murder of Natalee Holloway will forever be etched into America's collective memory, not just because of its tragic end, but because of the long, grueling path to the truth. For nearly 2 decades, Natalee's name was synonymous with unanswered questions. The media frenzy, the false leads, the confessions and retractions. It all created a fog of confusion. Her case inspired documentaries, books, and relentless public debate. It also exposed failings in international cooperation, deepened mistrust of Aruban authorities, and highlighted how easily the powerful or their children could seem to evade justice. What made it worse was that the man responsible played games with her memory, her family's grief, and the public's curiosity for years. Duran exploited that tragedy for money. He took another woman. And all the while, he watched the world beg for answers he already had. Even now, with the mystery finally solved, Natalee's body has never been found. There was no funeral, no grave to visit, just memories and the searing pain of what could have been. She would have made all her dreams come true, Beth Holloway said in court. "I think of the doctor she would be." Today, Beth says she wants to focus on her son's life. "Now I can appreciate her life through my son's life," she said. "And I really hadn't been able to do that. I've been a little distracted. Because even though Natalee's case is finally solved, the nature of its resolution, through extortion, a confession linked to another crime, and decades after the fact, makes it far more disturbing than anyone could have expected. The truth, when it finally came, was far worse than we thought. What do you think about Natalee's story? Feel free to share your comments with us in the comments section. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.